if
Yeah, I
one was
heard that
done
the other
here.
day there was a top general, a top Lebanese general who uh, was basically prevented from, or he was given immunity from testifying about this.
There's been discussion for many, I mean, going back now since the blast on how to remove immunity from a number
Mhm.
of people. These are politicians, these are intelligence officials. This is actually, if I'm not mistaken, you're referring to the head of general security, which was a few
Yes,
weeks
yes.
ago. Yes. Uh, these discussions come and go. No immunity has been lifted as of yet. And actually, these are actually ongoing discussions even today. The former Prime Minister Saad Hariri, who was in a caretaker capacity for 9 months, also now just saying that we should lift immunity. But it's a constant discussion. It hasn't gone anywhere.
Well, I think that is emblematic of what's going on in the country politically, just on a grander scale. Maybe we can talk a little bit about uh, how things came to where they are. I know obviously this is like we don't want to get too far back into the history, but just to give our listeners some context.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I mean,
and Sophie, you were in Lebanon more recently than I was doing work with Syrian refugees.
Yeah, it was 2017, so it was a while, like not too long ago, but
Yeah,
before any of all this stuff that like the recent events had happened.
yeah.
this is the question. If you ask a number of Lebanese, you'll get a number of answers. And I think the easiest way to approach this from a subjective view is to focus in on the state's erosion for over half a century. And it's a word that is used here. I don't think it catches enough traction, but it's something fundamental, which is that Lebanon lost its sovereignty long ago, going back to 1970. And this country has been a battlefield for regional problems. Now, that is not the only problem that has impacted Lebanon, but that is a structural problem. And clearly in 2020, we're still paying a price for being part of a regional war. This time around, we're a weapons depot for a regime that is fighting for its survival next door. But those problems are old, it's a structural problem. So, that I think is the fundamental background problem. Up front, in at least recent years, it has been an economic situation that has its ties to the Syrian conflict next door. Lebanon did pay an economic price for having that conflict seep into Lebanon. It's also pure corruption. Lebanon is famous for its corruption levels, and that has been, thankfully, it's been addressed vocally, repeatedly by protesters in this country, and it's being taken seriously, whether it's the IMF or the World Bank or even sanctions, which have been applied on Lebanese officials due to corruption, not due to geopolitics per se, not the usual sanctioning that we hear. It's actual corruption, whether it's the Magnitsky Act, which is fairly new, or even taking an aggressive tone against corruption in Lebanon, which is good. Uh, Add to that the Lebanese post-war system, and when I say post-war, I mean post-civil war.
Mm-hmm.
It functioned in a way that doesn't lend itself well to a post-civil war situation, meaning that many of the usual suspects are still in power. There is one militia, Hezbollah, that has survived 31 years of a post-war environment, and not just survived, it grew. And it grew to the point that it's a regional army. It's not a Lebanese local militia. So there's a situation there that's absurd for a post-war country trying to rebuild itself. And more, very, I mean, it's really the last few months is that the ungovernable situation has taken its toll. So institutions don't work. The state effectively collapsed. Now, I'll give you an example. I mean, electricity is the most obvious one. There's no electricity. In the capital city, Beirut, if you're lucky, you get 4 hours of electricity now. So
Only
you have
four?
generators, only four.
I mean,
You have generated.
even before this giant explosion, when in 2010 the electricity would go out for at least an hour per day.
Oh, it was going out for at least 3 hours per day after the Civil War ended. That was a good day if you got 21 hours of electricity. Yeah, but now it's reached the point that generators have replaced power plants. So, I mean, it's just a constant buzzing and humming of generators. So there's that side to the story, that the state doesn't work. Water supplies have reached critical levels. You get pumps to pump your water tanks. Pharmacies
water
don't
from
have
where?
either it's private companies that mostly do it, and they're going to run out at some point too. But it's the generators. The water supply, the water plants require generators. Even internet outages have become frequent. Our local internet providers need to have generators running to actually power. And if you don't have power, you can't supply internet. And very recently is something very serious. There's no medicine. If you want basic medicine, and sorry for this sort of vulgar example, but diarrhea, I needed some anti-diarrhea medicine, out of stock. You can't get something basic. I mean, Imodium, something that you take for granted.
Yeah.
Or anything. Paracetamol is decreasing in supplies as well. So there's a serious societal breakdown happening. Add to that the currency fluctuation, which has killed the economy.